The morning sun had barely touched the horizon when Beatrice Harper watched her uncle shake hands with a stranger over her fate, exchanging her like livestock for a well-worn saddle and a Winchester rifle that gleamed in the early light of the New Mexico territory. It was 1878, and the small settlement outside of Twin Falls had seen better days. The trading post where this transaction occurred smelled of dust, tobacco, and broken promises. Beatrice stood near the door, her hands clasped tightly in front of her simple cotton dress, watching as her Uncle Luther Harper counted the items as if she were not even present in the room. The stranger who had traded for her was a rail, thin man with yellowed teeth and a cruel look in his eyes that made her stomach turn. His name was Vernon Schultz, and he ran a saloon 3 territories over where women were treated worse than the horses in the stable. "She is healthy, can cook, and does not complain much," Luther said, his voice devoid of any emotion. He had taken Beatrice in after her parents died of fever 2 years prior, but he had never wanted the responsibility. His wife had passed on the previous winter, leaving him bitter and desperate for anything that might ease his circumstances. Beatrice felt tears threatening to spill but held them back. She was 19 years old and had imagined many possible futures for herself, but none quite like this. The reality of her situation felt like a weight pressing down on her chest, making it difficult to breathe. She thought of her mother's gentle hands, her father's warm laugh, and wondered what they would think if they could see her now. "Good enough," Vernon said, running his tongue over his lips in a way that made Beatrice's skin crawl. "I will take her now." Before Vernon could reach for Beatrice's arm, the door to the trading post swung open with such force that it banged against the wall. A tall figure filled the doorway, silhouetted against the bright morning sun. As he stepped inside, Beatrice could see him clearly. He was a cowboy, probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore dusty trail clothes, a worn leather vest, and a gun belt that sat comfortably on his hips as if it belonged there. "That saddle," the cowboy said, his voice low and measured, "belongs to me. It was stolen from my camp 3 nights ago along with my rifle." The room went silent. Luther's face paled and Vernon took a step back, his hand moving instinctively toward his own weapon. The cowboy's eyes tracked the movement, but his expression remained calm, almost dangerously so. "Now, I do not know what kind of trade was happening here," the cowboy continued, his gaze sweeping over the scene before landing on Beatrice, "but I will be taking my property back." "These items were traded fair," Luther protested, though his voice wavered. "I got them from a man passing through yesterday. I did not know they were stolen." The cowboy walked further into the room, his boots making soft sounds on the wooden floor. He picked up the rifle, examined it, and nodded to himself. "This is definitely mine. My initials are carved into the stock. EX. He turned the rifle slightly, revealing the letters. "Ethan Xavier, that would be me." Vernon's face had turned an ugly shade of red. "I made a fair trade. The girl is mine now." Ethan's expression hardened. He looked at Beatrice again, really looked at her, and she saw something shift in his eyes. It was not pity exactly, but something deeper, something that made her stand a little straighter despite her fear. "A human being cannot be traded like property," Ethan said flatly. "I am taking my saddle and my rifle, and this transaction is void. You cannot just come in here and dictate terms," Vernon snarled, his hand now resting on his gun. "I made a deal." "A deal involving stolen property is not valid," Ethan replied. His voice had not risen, but there was steel in it now. "And a deal involving a human life is not something I will stand by and watch happen." Luther stepped between them, his hands raised. "Please, there is no need for violence." If the items were stolen, then yes, the trade is off. The girl stays with me. Beatrice found her voice for the first time. No. Everyone turned to look at her. I will not stay with you, Uncle Luther. You have made it clear I am nothing but a burden to you. You were willing to trade me away to a stranger without a second thought. You ungrateful girl, Luther began, but Ethan cut him off. Enough. The single word carried such authority that Luther fell silent. Ethan looked at Beatrice. Do you have anywhere else to go, miss? Beatrice shook her head, feeling the weight of her situation settle over her like a heavy blanket. No. My parents are dead. I have no other family. Then you will come with me, Ethan said, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. I work for the Hartley Ranch, about 2 days' ride from here. They are always looking for help, and Mrs. Hartley runs a respectable household. You would be paid fairly for your work and treated with dignity. You cannot just take her, Vernon protested, though he seemed less confident now. I am not taking anyone, Ethan replied. I am offering her a choice which is more than either of you did. He turned to Beatrice. It is up to you, miss. You can stay here, go with him, or come with me to the Hartley Ranch. Your decision. Beatrice looked at her uncle, who would not meet her eyes. She looked at Vernon, whose expression promised only misery. Then she looked at Ethan Xavier, this stranger who had walked into the trading post and upended everything. There was something in his face that seemed honest, something that made her want to trust him even though she knew nothing about him. I will go with you, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. To the Hartley Ranch. Ethan nodded. Get your things. I have nothing, Beatrice admitted. Just what I am wearing. Something flickered across Ethan's face, anger perhaps, directed at her uncle, but he simply collected his saddle and rifle and gestured toward the door. Then we should get moving. We have a long ride ahead. As they walked out of the trading post, Vernon called after them. You will regret this, Xavier. You are making an enemy today. Ethan paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. I have made plenty of enemies. One more will not keep me up at night. Outside, 2 horses were tied to the hitching post. One was a beautiful chestnut mare, the other a sturdy gray gelding. Ethan walked to the chestnut and began securing his saddle, his movements efficient and practiced. Beatrice stood uncertainly, aware that she had just made a decision that would change the entire course of her life. Have you ridden before? Ethan asked as he tightened the cinch. Yes, Beatrice replied. My father taught me when I was young. Good, you will ride the mare. Her name is Copper. She has a gentle temperament. He patted the horse's neck affectionately, and Copper nickered softly in response. Ethan helped Beatrice mount, his touch impersonal but careful. Once she was settled in the saddle, he handed her the reins. We will take it slow until I see how comfortable you are. He mounted his own horse, the gray gelding, with practiced ease. As they started down the dusty road leading away from the settlement, Beatrice felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. She was leaving behind everything familiar, heading into the unknown with a man she had just met. But anything seemed better than the fate that had awaited her in that trading post. They rode in silence for the first hour. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the landscape around them shifted from the scrubby terrain near the settlement to rolling hills dotted with juniper and piñon trees. The air smelled clean, carrying hints of sage and wildflowers. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way that Beatrice had always loved about New Mexico. Finally, Ethan spoke. I am sorry that happened to you back there. Your uncle had no right. Beatrice glanced at him. He rode easily, his body moving with the rhythm of his horse, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon in a way that spoke of long experience on the trail. Thank you for intervening. I do not know what would have happened if you had not come in when you did. Nothing good, Ethan said grimly. I know Vernon Schultz's reputation. He runs a rough establishment and he treats the women who work for him like property. You are better off anywhere else." "How did you know your saddle was there?" Beatrice asked, curious despite herself. "I have been tracking the man who stole it for 3 days. Lost his trail yesterday but figured he would head to the trading post to sell what he took. I got lucky that he moved quickly and your uncle had not had time to trade it to someone else yet." He paused. "Though if I had known what kind of trade your uncle was planning, I would have ridden faster." There was an edge to his voice that made Beatrice believe him. She studied his profile, noting the firm set of his jaw, the way his eyes remained alert. "Why did you offer to help me?" "You could have just taken your things and left." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. "My mother was in a similar situation once. Before she met my father, her own family tried to marry her off to a man who would have made her life hell. A stranger helped her get away, gave her a chance to choose her own path. She always said that kindness saved her life." He glanced at Beatrice. "I guess I figured if I could do the same for someone else, I should." Beatrice felt something warm bloom in her chest. "Is your mother still alive?" "No. She died when I was 17. Fever took her, same as it takes so many out here. My father followed her 6 months later. I think he died of a broken heart as much as anything else. They loved each other deeply." There was no self-pity in his voice, just a simple statement of fact. "I am sorry," Beatrice said quietly. "I lost my parents 2 years ago, also to fever. It swept through our town and took so many people." "It is a hard land," Ethan acknowledged, "but it is also beautiful. And there are good people here, people who try to do right by each other. The Hartleys are like that. You will like them." They rode on, and gradually Beatrice began to relax. The rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her, the vast open sky above, and the quiet presence of Ethan beside her all combined to create a strange sense of peace. She had been so afraid for so long, first after her parents died, then living with her uncle who clearly resented her presence. This felt different. Uncertain, yes, but not frightening in the same way. Around midday, they stopped near a small stream to water the horses and rest. Ethan produced some jerky and hardtack from his saddlebags and offered half to Beatrice. It was not much, but she was hungry enough that it tasted good. They sat on a flat rock near the water, eating in companionable silence. "Tell me about the Hartley Ranch," Beatrice said after a while. "What is it like?" Ethan leaned back on his hands, his face turned toward the sun. "It is a good-sized operation. They run cattle and horses, about 3,000 head of cattle and maybe 50 horses. The ranch house is solid, built of adobe and wood. There are several outbuildings, bunkhouses for the hands, a barn, stables, a cookhouse. The Hartleys have been there for about 15 years, built it up from nothing." "What are they like?" Beatrice asked. "Richard Hartley is fair but firm. He expects a full day's work for a full day's pay, but he treats his people well. His wife, Margaret, is one of the kindest women I have ever met. They have 3 children, 2 sons who work the ranch and a daughter who is about your age. Margaret runs the household and often needs help with cooking, cleaning, preserving food, that kind of thing. She pays fair wages and provides room and board." "It sounds nice," Beatrice said wistfully. "It is a good place," Ethan agreed. "I have worked there for 5 years now. Before that, I drifted from ranch to ranch, never staying anywhere long. But the Hartleys made me feel like I was part of something, like I belonged. That matters more than I can say." Beatrice studied him in the bright sunlight. He had a strong face, weathered from years outdoors, with small lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun. His hands were calloused and scarred, the hands of a man who worked hard. But there was a gentleness in the way he moved, in the way he spoke, that made her feel safe. "I will work hard," she promised. "I do not want to be a burden to anyone else." Ethan looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. "You are not a burden, Beatrice. What your uncle did was wrong, and it was not a reflection on you. Every person deserves to be treated with dignity and respect. Do not ever let anyone make you feel otherwise." The way he said her name, with such certainty and warmth, made Beatrice's heart skip. She realized suddenly that she was looking at him differently than she had just hours ago. He was not just a stranger who had rescued her. He was a man with depth and kindness, someone who stood up for what was right even when it would have been easier to walk away. "Thank you, Ethan," she said softly. He nodded, then stood and stretched. "We should keep moving. I want to cover good ground before we camp for the night." They mounted up again and continued their journey. The afternoon passed pleasantly enough. Ethan pointed out landmarks, told her stories about the area, and gradually Beatrice found herself laughing at his dry sense of humor. He had a way of describing things that was both honest and amusing, painting pictures with his words of life on the ranch, of cattle drives and roundups, of long nights under the stars. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Ethan led them to a small canyon with good shelter and a trickle of water. "We will camp here tonight," he announced, dismounting. Beatrice slid down from Copper, her legs stiff from the long ride. Ethan immediately set about tending to the horses, removing their saddles and rubbing them down with handfuls of dried grass. Beatrice watched for a moment, then asked, "What can I do to help?" Ethan looked surprised, as if he had not expected the offer. "Can you gather some wood for a fire?" "Just small stuff, dry branches and such. Stay within sight of camp." Beatrice nodded and set off, grateful to stretch her legs and to have something useful to do. She gathered an armload of suitable branches and returned to find Ethan arranging rocks for a fire pit. He had also spread out his bedroll and was unpacking supplies from his saddlebags. Within a short time, Ethan had a small fire going and was preparing a simple meal of beans and coffee. The smell made Beatrice's stomach rumble. She had not realized how hungry she was. "Here," Ethan said, handing her a tin plate heaped with beans and a piece of cornbread he had wrapped in cloth. "It is not fancy, but it will fill you up." "It is perfect," Beatrice said, and she meant it. They ate as the stars began to appear overhead, countless points of light in the darkening sky. After they finished eating, Ethan cleaned the dishes while Beatrice sat by the fire, absorbing its warmth. The temperature had dropped significantly once the sun set, and she wrapped her arms around herself. "You will need this," Ethan said, suddenly beside her with a blanket. "It gets cold out here at night." "What about you?" Beatrice asked as he draped the blanket around her shoulders. "I have another one with my bedroll. I am used to sleeping rough. You should take the spot closer to the fire. Stay warm." He hesitated, then added, "I know this situation is not ideal. I want you to know that you are safe with me. I would never do anything to harm you or take advantage of you." Beatrice looked up at him, seeing the earnestness in his face. "I believe you," she said, and realized it was true. Despite having known him for less than a day, she trusted Ethan Xavier in a way she had not trusted anyone since her parents died. Ethan nodded, seeming relieved. He moved to the other side of the fire and spread out his bedroll. "Try to get some sleep. We have another long day tomorrow." Beatrice lay down near the fire, wrapped in the blanket Ethan had given her. It smelled of leather and sage and something distinctly him. She watched the flames dance and listened to the night sounds around them, the distant call of a coyote, the rustle of wind through the canyon, the soft breathing of the horses. Despite everything that had happened, despite the uncertainty of her future, Beatrice felt strangely at peace. She glanced across the fire at Ethan, who lay with his hat pulled low over his eyes, his arms crossed over his chest. Even in rest, he seemed alert, ready to respond to any threat. It made her feel protected in a way she had not felt in a long time. As sleep began to claim her, Beatrice found herself thinking about the events of the day. Her uncle's betrayal, Vernon's cruel eyes, and then Ethan walking through that door like something out of a story. He had said she was not for sale, had stood up to men who would have happily seen her enslaved or worse. He had offered her a choice, a chance at her real life. That meant more than he could possibly know. Beatrice woke to the smell of coffee and the soft light of dawn. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, then remembered where she was. Ethan was already up, tending to the fire and heating water in a small pot. The horses were saddled and ready to go. "Good morning," Ethan said when he noticed she was awake. "Coffee will be ready in a minute. We should eat quickly and get moving. If we make good time, we can reach the ranch by late afternoon." Beatrice folded the blanket he had lent her and stood, stretching out the stiffness from sleeping on the ground. Her muscles ached, and she knew she would be sore from the long ride yesterday, but she did not complain. This was her new reality, and she would adapt to it. Ethan handed her a cup of coffee and some more cornbread. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I expected," Beatrice admitted. "Thank you for the blanket." "Of course." Ethan sipped his own coffee, looking out at the landscape as the sun continued to rise. "We will follow the canyon south for a few miles, then cut east toward the ranch. The terrain gets a bit rougher, but nothing Copper cannot handle." They broke camp efficiently. Ethan having done this so many times it was second nature. Soon they were back on the trail, riding through the cool morning air. Beatrice found herself looking forward to reaching the Hartley Ranch, to meeting the people Ethan had spoken so highly of, to having a place where she could work and earn her keep honestly. As they rode, Ethan talked more about the ranch, about the daily routines, about the other hands who worked there. He had a particular friend named Samuel Torres, a Mexican vaquero who had taught Ethan most of what he knew about handling cattle and horses. There was also a cook named Lu Chen, originally from California, who made the best biscuits west of the Mississippi according to Ethan. "You will like everyone," Ethan assured her. "They are good people. Some of them have rough edges, but they are loyal and honest." "What do you do at the ranch?" Beatrice asked. "You mentioned you have worked there for 5 years. I am a ranch hand, same as the others. I ride fence lines, help with the cattle, break horses when needed, whatever needs doing. During roundup and branding, we all work from sunup to sundown. In the winter, things slow down a bit, but there is always work. The ranch does not run itself." "Do you like it?" Beatrice asked. Ethan considered the question. "I do. I like working with the animals, being outdoors. I like knowing that I am helping build something that will last." The Hartleys treat their land with respect, manage the herds carefully. It feels like good work, honest work. The sincerity in his voice touched Beatrice. She could tell that Ethan was a man who valued integrity, who took pride in doing a job well. It was an admirable quality, one she wished more people possessed. The morning wore on, and the landscape around them began to change. They left the canyon and rode across more open terrain, passing through areas of grassland interspersed with rocky outcroppings. In the distance, Beatrice could see mountains, their peaks still touched with snow even though it was late spring. Around midday, they stopped again to rest the horses and eat a quick meal. Ethan had been right about the terrain getting rougher. Beatrice's legs and back ached from the constant adjustments needed to stay balanced in the saddle, but she refused to complain. If this was what it took to reach the ranch and start her new life, she would endure it. "You are doing well," Ethan said, as if reading her thoughts. Many people who are not used to riding would be complaining by now, You are tougher than you look." Beatrice smiled at the compliment. "My father always said that hardship builds character. I suppose I have had plenty of opportunity to build character these past 2 years." "Tell me about them," Ethan said. "Your parents, if you do not mind talking about it." Beatrice found that she did not mind. In fact, it felt good to talk about them with someone who seemed genuinely interested. "My father was a school teacher. He loved books and learning, and he passed that love on to me. He taught me to read and write, to do mathematics, to think critically about the world. My mother was gentle and kind. She could make even the poorest meal feel like a feast, could find joy in the smallest things. They loved each other very much, and they loved me. I was fortunate to have them as long as I did." "They sound like good people," Ethan said. "They were. When they died, I felt like my whole world collapsed. My uncle took me in, but he was never happy about it. His wife tried to be kind, but she was sick herself, and after she died, Uncle Luther just gave up on everything. He started drinking heavily, gambling, making bad decisions. I tried to help, but he resented me for it, said I reminded him of what he had lost." "That was not your fault," Ethan said firmly. "Grief affects people differently, but it does not excuse what he tried to do to you." "I know," Beatrice said, "but it still hurt." They sat in silence for a moment, both lost in their own thoughts. Then Ethan stood and offered Beatrice's hand to help her up. "Come on. We have a few more hours of riding, and then you can rest properly at the ranch." The afternoon passed more quickly than the morning had. Perhaps it was because Beatrice knew they were getting close to their destination. Or perhaps it was because she and Ethan talked more, sharing stories and learning about each other. Beatrice discovered that Ethan had a subtle sense of humor, a way of finding amusement in everyday situations without being cruel or mocking. He also had a deep respect for the land and the animals that lived on it, pointing out various plants and their uses, explaining the behaviors of different creatures they encountered. For his part, Ethan seemed increasingly comfortable around Beatrice. He smiled more, laughed at her observations, and asked questions about her life before tragedy had struck. Beatrice found herself opening up to him in ways she had not opened up to anyone in years. There was something about Ethan that made her feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to share the parts of herself she usually kept hidden. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they crested a hill and Ethan pointed ahead. "There. That is the Hartley Ranch." Beatrice looked where he indicated and saw a collection of buildings spread out in a valley below. The main house was large and sturdy looking, built of adobe with a wide porch wrapping around it. Nearby were several smaller structures, corrals full of horses, and what looked like hundreds of cattle dotting the grassland beyond. Smoke rose from a chimney, and even from this distance, the place had an air of prosperity and permanence. "It is beautiful," Beatrice breathed. "It is home," Ethan said simply, and she heard the affection in his voice. They rode down the hill and through a gate marked with a large H fashioned from wrought iron. As they approached the main house, several people emerged to greet them. A middle-aged couple came out first, followed by a young woman about Beatrice's age and two men in their 20s. Ethan dismounted and helped Beatrice down, then turned to face the couple. "Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Hartley, good to see you." "Ethan, we were not expecting you back so soon," the man said. He was tall and weathered, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "We heard about your saddle being stolen. Did you recover it?" "I did," Ethan confirmed. "I also brought someone who needs help." He gestured to Beatrice. "This is Beatrice Harper. Her uncle was trying to trade her to a man named Vernon Schultz in exchange for my stolen saddle and rifle. I intervened and offered to bring her here to see if you might have work for her." Mrs. Hartley's eyes widened in shock and then anger. "Trade her? like an animal. She immediately turned to Beatrice, her expression softening. "Oh, you poor dear. Of course you can stay here. We always have need for extra hands, especially with the household work." She was a handsome woman with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple dress and apron. Her face was lined from years of sun and hard work, but her eyes were warm and welcoming. "Thank you, madam," Beatrice said, feeling overwhelmed with relief. "I will work hard. I can cook, clean, sew, preserve food, tend a garden, whatever you need." "I am sure you will be wonderful, Mrs. Hartley said. She turned to the young woman beside her. "This is our daughter, Sarah. Sarah, take Beatrice inside and help her get settled. She must be exhausted from the journey." Sarah Hartley smiled at Beatrice. She had her mother's warm eyes and a friendly, open face. "Come on. I will show you where you will be staying, and you can clean up a bit. Dinner will be ready in about an hour." Beatrice glanced back at Ethan, feeling suddenly anxious about leaving his side. He had been her anchor through this whole ordeal, and the thought of being separated from him, even briefly, was unsettling. Ethan seemed to understand. He gave her a reassuring nod. "You are in good hands. I will see you at dinner." Beatrice followed Sarah into the house, which was as solid and comfortable inside as it had appeared from the outside. The main room was spacious, with a large fireplace, comfortable furniture, and woven rugs on the wooden floor. Everything was clean and well maintained, speaking of a household that was run with care and attention. Sarah led Beatrice down a hallway to a small but pleasant room. It contained a narrow bed, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, a small wardrobe, and a window that looked out over the valley. After weeks of sleeping on a thin pallet in her uncle's cramped cabin, it seemed like luxury. "This will be your room," Sarah said. "I know it is not much, but it is private and the bed is comfortable. There is water in the pitcher for washing, and I will bring you some clean clothes. We are about the same size, so they should fit well enough until we can make you some of your own." "Thank you," Beatrice said, meaning it deeply. "Everyone has been so kind." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed and patted the space next to her, inviting Beatrice to sit. "Ethan told my father what happened, about your uncle trying to trade you. That is horrible. I cannot imagine how frightened you must have been." "It was terrifying," Beatrice admitted. "But then Ethan walked in and changed everything. He said I was not for sale, took back his saddle and rifle, and offered me a way out. He saved me." Sarah's expression turned knowing. "That sounds like Ethan. He has a strong sense of what is right and wrong, and he does not hesitate to act when he sees an injustice. All the hands respect him because of that. My brothers say he is the best man they know." "He seems like a good person," Beatrice said carefully, not wanting to reveal too much of what she was feeling. She was still trying to sort through her own emotions, the gratitude and growing attraction that seemed to be tangling together in confusing ways. "He is," Sarah agreed, "and he is single if you were wondering." She grinned at Beatrice's blush. "Sorry, I am just teasing." But truly, Ethan has always been private about his personal life. He works hard, keeps to himself mostly, though he is friendly enough with the other hands. My mother has tried to set him up with several women from town over the years, but he has never shown interest in any of them." Beatrice did not know what to say to that, so she simply nodded. Sarah seemed to take pity on her and stood. "Let me get you those clothes and some hot water. You can wash up and change, and then I will show you around before dinner." True to her word, Sarah returned with a simple dress in a soft blue fabric, undergarments, and a pitcher of steaming water. She left Beatrice alone to clean up and change. Beatrice stripped off her dusty, travel-worn dress and washed thoroughly, grateful for the hot water and the soap that smelled of lavender. She put on the clean clothes Sarah had provided, which fit reasonably well, and used the small mirror above the washstand to tidy her hair. When she emerged from the room, she felt more human than she had in days. Sarah was waiting in the hallway and led her on a tour of the house. Besides the main room and bedrooms, there was a large kitchen, a dining room with a long table that could seat at least a dozen people, and a back porch that overlooked a vegetable garden and the outbuildings beyond. "Mother and I do most of the cooking and housework," Sarah explained, "but there is always more to do, especially during busy times like Roundup or when we have extra hands hired on. We will be grateful for your help." "I am happy to do whatever is needed," Beatrice assured her. They walked outside and Sarah pointed out the various buildings. "That is the bunkhouse where the hands sleep. Over there is the barn and the stables. The cookhouse is where everyone eats breakfast together during busy seasons. That building is for storing feed and equipment. And those corrals are for the horses we are training." As if on cue, Beatrice saw Ethan emerge from the bunkhouse. He had cleaned up as well, changed into fresh clothes, and his dark hair was still damp, slicked back from his face. He caught sight of her and Sarah and walked over. "Settling in all right?" he asked Beatrice. "Yes, everyone has been wonderful," Beatrice replied. She felt suddenly shy around him, aware of how he looked after cleaning up, of the way his shirt stretched across his broad shoulders. "Good," Ethan said. He turned to Sarah. "Your mother said dinner will be ready soon. She asked me to let you know." "We should head back then," Sarah said. She linked her arm through Beatrice's in a friendly gesture. "Come on. You must be starving. Mother is making pot roast tonight and it is delicious." Dinner at the Hartley Ranch was a lively affair. The family gathered around the large dining table, along with Ethan and several other ranch hands who ate with the family. There was Samuel Torres, the vaquero Ethan had mentioned, a man with a ready smile and an easy laugh. Lou Chen, the cook, who despite his talents in the cookhouse, ate his meals with everyone else. And the two Hartley sons, James and Thomas, both strong young men who clearly loved ranch life. The conversation flowed easily, with stories about the day's work, plans for the upcoming week, and good-natured teasing among the men. Mrs. Hartley presided over it all with a gentle authority, making sure everyone had enough to eat and that Beatrice felt included in the conversation. Beatrice found herself relaxing in the warmth of the family dynamic. It reminded her of dinners with her own parents, of feeling like she belonged somewhere. She caught Ethan watching her several times from across the table, and each time their eyes met, she felt a flutter in her chest that she was beginning to recognize as attraction. After dinner, the men headed back to the bunkhouse while Sarah and Beatrice helped Mrs. Hartley clean up. As they washed dishes, Mrs. Hartley asked Beatrice more about her situation, listening with sympathy and anger at what her uncle had tried to do. "You will be safe here," Mrs. Hartley assured her. "We take care of our own, and as far as I am concerned, you are part of this family now. You will earn fair wages, have your own room, and be treated with respect. If you ever need anything or have concerns, you come to me directly." "Thank you, Mrs. Hartley," Beatrice said, fighting back tears at the unexpected kindness. "I cannot tell you how much this means to me." "Call me Margaret," Mrs. Hartley said, patting Beatrice's hand. "We are not formal here among family." That night, Beatrice lay in her comfortable bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling down for the night. She thought about everything that had happened in the past 2 days, how dramatically her life had changed. She thought about her uncle's betrayal and Vernon Schultz's cruel intentions. But mostly, she thought about Ethan Xavier, the man who had walked into that trading post and changed everything. She barely knew him, yet she felt drawn to him in a way she could not quite explain. It was more than gratitude, though she was certainly grateful. There was something about his quiet strength, his integrity, his kindness that called to something deep inside her. She found herself wanting to know more about him, to understand what made him the man he was. As sleep finally claimed her, Beatrice's last thought was of Ethan's gray eyes and the way he had looked at her when he said she was not for sale. The next morning, Beatrice woke early and made her way to the kitchen, determined to prove her worth. She found Margaret already there, starting breakfast preparations. "You did not have to get up so early," Margaret said, though she looked pleased. "You have been through a lot. You should rest." "I want to help," Beatrice insisted. "Please let me earn my keep." Margaret studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Can you make biscuits? We need several dozen for the men." "I can," Beatrice confirmed. Her mother had taught her to make biscuits that were light and fluffy, and it was one of her specialties. She set to work measuring flour, cutting in lard, and mixing the dough with practiced efficiency. Margaret watched approvingly as Beatrice shaped the biscuits and arranged them on baking sheets. By the time the men started arriving for breakfast, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread, bacon, and coffee. Ethan was among the first to arrive, along with Samuel. His face lit up when he saw Beatrice working beside Margaret. "Something smells amazing," Samuel said, his accent lending a musical quality to his words. "Beatrice made the biscuits," Margaret announced. "Let us see if they taste as good as they smell." When the men bit into the golden biscuits, slathered with butter, the universal sounds of appreciation made Beatrice blush with pleasure. Ethan caught her eye and gave her a warm smile that made her heart skip. "These are incredible," James Hartley said around a mouthful. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" "My mother," Beatrice replied. "She was a wonderful cook. She said that food made with care nourishes more than just the body." "She was a wise woman," Margaret said approvingly. After breakfast, the men dispersed to their various tasks, and Beatrice spent the day learning the routines of the household. She helped Margaret with laundry, which involved hauling water, heating it, scrubbing clothes on a washboard, and hanging everything to dry in the New Mexico sun. It was hard, physical work, but Beatrice did not mind. It felt good to be useful, to be contributing to the household in meaningful ways. Sarah worked alongside them, and the three women fell into an easy rhythm. Sarah was full of stories about growing up on the ranch, about her brother's antics, about the various adventures and misadventures that were part of ranch life. She made Beatrice laugh, and for the first time in a long time, Beatrice felt genuine joy. In the afternoon, while the laundry dried, Margaret asked Beatrice to help her in the garden. They weeded, watered, and harvested vegetables for dinner. The work was peaceful, and Margaret talked about her life, about how she and Richard had come to New Mexico, built the ranch from nothing, raised their children here. "It has not always been easy," Margaret admitted. "There have been droughts and harsh winters, conflicts with neighboring ranchers, injuries and illnesses. But we have persevered because we work together, because we treat each other with respect and love. That is what makes a place a home, not the buildings or the land, but the people." Her words resonated with Beatrice. She realized that what she had been searching for since her parents died was not just a place to live, but a place to belong. The Hartley Ranch, with its warm, welcoming family and hardworking hands, was offering her exactly that. As the days turned into weeks, Beatrice settled into the rhythm of ranch life. She woke early, helped prepare meals, did housework, tended the garden, and learned new skills like preserving food and making soap. Margaret and Sarah became like family to her, teaching her, laughing with her, including her in every aspect of household management. But it was her interactions with Ethan that occupied most of her thoughts. They saw each other at meals and occasionally during the day when he came to the house for some reason or another. Each encounter was brief, but they accumulated in Beatrice's memory like treasures. The way he thanked her for the meals she helped prepare. The time he helped her carry water from the well when he noticed her struggling. The evening he found her on the porch watching the sunset and sat beside her, neither of them speaking, just sharing the quiet beauty of the moment. Beatrice found herself looking for excuses to be where Ethan might be. She volunteered to take lunch to the men working in the far pastures, hoping he would be among them. She lingered after dinner, helping clean up slowly, knowing that Ethan often stayed to talk with Richard about ranch business. She was not entirely sure when her gratitude had transformed into something deeper, but she could no longer deny that she was developing strong feelings for him. For his part, Ethan seemed equally drawn to Beatrice. He found reasons to stop by the house more frequently. He offered to teach her to ride better, to help her improve her skills in the saddle. On Sundays, when work was lighter, he would seek her out and they would walk together around the ranch, talking about everything and nothing. About a month after Beatrice's arrival, there was a dance in town. The whole ranch was invited and Margaret insisted that Beatrice come along. "You have been working so hard," Margaret said. "You deserve an evening of fun. Besides, there will be people your age there. You should meet the community, make friends." Sarah was excited about the dance and helped Beatrice get ready, lending her a dress in a pretty shade of green that brought out the color in Beatrice's eyes. They rode into town in the ranch's large wagon, everyone in good spirits. The dance was held in the town's community hall, a large wooden building that had been decorated with lanterns and streamers. A small band played lively music, and people filled the floor, dancing and laughing. Beatrice, who had not been to a social event in years, felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She danced with several of the ranch hands, with James and Thomas Hartley, with several young men from town. Everyone was friendly, and she found herself actually enjoying the evening. But her eyes kept searching the crowd for Ethan. She finally spotted him standing along the wall, talking with Samuel. He wore clean trousers and a white shirt, looking more dressed up than she had ever seen him. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, and their eyes met across the crowded room. Ethan excused himself from Samuel and made his way toward Beatrice. Her heart began to pound as he approached. "Would you like to dance?" he asked, offering his hand. "Yes," Beatrice breathed, placing her hand in his. He led her onto the dance floor just as the band began a slower song. Ethan placed one hand on her waist, held her other hand in his, and began to move with surprising grace. Beatrice had not realized he could dance. "You are full of surprises," she said, looking up at him. "My mother taught me," Ethan replied. She said a man should know how to dance, that it was a sign of respect for the woman he was dancing with. "She taught you well," Beatrice said. They moved together smoothly, and Beatrice became acutely aware of everywhere their bodies touched. The warmth of his hand on her waist, the calluses on his palm against hers, the way he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You look beautiful tonight," Ethan said quietly. "That color suits you." Beatrice felt her cheeks flush. "Thank you. You look very nice yourself." "I clean up all right when I make the effort," Ethan said with a slight smile. They fell into silence, but it was a comfortable silence, filled with unspoken things that neither was quite ready to say. As the song ended, Ethan held her for a moment longer than necessary before reluctantly releasing her. "Thank you for the dance," he said. "Thank you for asking me," Beatrice replied. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Beatrice danced with others, talked and laughed, but part of her attention was always on Ethan. She noticed that he did not dance with anyone else, that he spent most of the evening watching her from the sidelines. The knowledge made her feel warm and wanted in a way she had never experienced before. On the ride back to the ranch, Beatrice sat in the wagon bed with Sarah and some of the hands, tired but happy. Ethan rode his horse alongside the wagon, and she could feel his presence even in the darkness. When they arrived back at the ranch and everyone dispersed to their respective sleeping quarters, Ethan helped Beatrice down from the wagon. "Did you enjoy yourself tonight?" he asked, his hands lingering on her waist. "I did," Beatrice said. "Very much. Thank you for dancing with me." "It was my pleasure," Ethan said. "Maybe we could do it again sometime, not at a dance necessarily, but just the two of us." Beatrice's heart soared. "I would like that." They stood there in the moonlight, neither wanting to part ways. Finally, Ethan stepped back reluctantly. "Good night, Beatrice." "Good night, Ethan," she whispered. As Beatrice got ready for bed that night, she could not stop smiling. She replayed every moment of dancing with Ethan, the way he had held her, the way he had looked at her. She was falling in love with him, she realized. Perhaps she had been falling since that first day in the trading post when he had walked in and said she was not for sale. The question was, did he feel the same way? Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Beatrice grew closer. Their interactions became more frequent, more intimate in small ways. He brought her wildflowers he had found while riding the range. She made his favorite dessert and saved him an extra large piece. They took walks together in the evenings, talking about their hopes and dreams, their pasts and their futures. One evening, about 2 months after Beatrice had arrived at the ranch, Ethan asked her to take a walk with him after dinner. They strolled away from the main buildings, up a small hill that overlooked the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange, pink, and purple. "I love this view," Beatrice said, gazing out at the landscape. "I never get tired of it." "It is beautiful," Ethan agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the sunset. "Beatrice, there is something I need to tell you." She turned to face him, her heart beginning to race at the serious tone in his voice. "What is it?" Ethan took a deep breath. "These past 2 months have been the best of my life. Getting to know you, spending time with you, watching you become part of the ranch family, it has changed everything for me. You have changed everything for me." "Ethan," Beatrice whispered, hardly daring to hope. "I am falling in love with you," Ethan said, his gray eyes intense and sincere. "I know it might seem too soon, or maybe you do not feel the same way, but I could not keep it to myself any longer. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. You are kind and strong and smart and beautiful. When I wake up in the morning, you are my first thought. When I go to sleep at night, you are my last. I want to spend every day getting to know you better, learning all the little things that make you who you are." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes, but they were tears of joy. "I am falling in love with you too," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I think I started falling that first day when you walked into that trading post and stood up for me. You gave me back my dignity, my freedom, my future. But more than that, you gave me hope. Hope that there are good men in this world, men who do the right thing even when it is hard." Ethan reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "I do not know what I did to deserve you walking into my life, but I am grateful every single day." "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Please," Beatrice breathed. Ethan leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, gentle at first, then deeper as Beatrice responded. It was Beatrice's first kiss, and it was everything she had imagined and more. Ethan's lips were warm and firm, and she felt the kiss all the way to her toes. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. "Wow," Beatrice said, and Ethan laughed, a sound of pure happiness. "Yeah," he agreed. "Wow. They stood there on the hill as the stars began to appear, wrapped in each other's arms, feeling like they were the only two people in the world. Eventually, they walked back to the ranch hand in hand, neither wanting to let go of the other. The next morning at breakfast, Ethan asked to speak with Richard privately after the meal. Beatrice watched them disappear into Richard's office, her stomach fluttering with nervousness. She had a good idea what Ethan wanted to discuss, and the thought filled her with equal parts excitement and terror. When they emerged about 20 minutes later, both men were smiling. Richard clapped Ethan on the shoulder, then walked over to where Beatrice was helping Margaret with the dishes. "Beatrice, may I speak with you for a moment?" Richard asked. "Of course," Beatrice said, drying her hands on a towel. They went out onto the porch, and Richard's expression was kind. "Ethan just asked for my permission to court you. Since you do not have a father or guardian, I feel somewhat responsible for your well-being. I wanted to make sure this is something you want before giving my blessing." "It is," Beatrice said immediately. "I care for Ethan very much." Richard nodded. "He is a good man, one of the best I have ever known. He will treat you right, I am sure of that. You have my blessing, and I know Margaret will be thrilled. She is quite fond of you both." "Thank you, Mr. Hartley," Beatrice said, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude. "Richard," he corrected gently. "We are family here." When Beatrice went back inside, Margaret pulled her into a hug. "Sarah just told me. Oh, my dear, I am so happy for you. Ethan is wonderful, and you two are perfect for each other." The next few months were the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Ethan courted properly, always with a chaperone as was appropriate, but they found ways to steal private moments together. Long walks, conversations on the porch in the evenings, rides out to check on cattle where they could talk freely. Ethan was a patient, attentive suitor. He brought her small gifts, wildflowers and pretty stones he found on the range. He listened to her talk about her parents and her past, offering comfort and understanding. He shared his own stories, his own dreams. They discovered they both loved books and would often read together in the evenings. Ethan wanted to travel someday, to see more of the country, and Beatrice found herself wanting that too, as long as they were together. As fall arrived and the weather began to cool, the ranch became busier with preparations for winter. Cattle needed to be moved to lower pastures, fences needed to be repaired, food needed to be preserved. Everyone worked long hours, but there was a sense of satisfaction in preparing for the harsh months ahead. One evening in late October, Ethan asked Beatrice to meet him on the porch after dinner. When she arrived, she found him pacing nervously, which was unusual for him. "Is everything all right?" Beatrice asked, concerned. Ethan stopped pacing and took her hands in his. "Everything is perfect, actually. Beatrice, these past 4 months with you have been incredible. I cannot imagine my life without you anymore. I do not want to imagine it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Beatrice's heart began to pound as he opened it, revealing a simple gold band with a small blue stone set in it. "This was my mother's ring," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is the only thing I have of hers. She told me once that she wanted me to give it to the woman I would marry, the woman I would build a life with. Beatrice Harper, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my best friend for the rest of our lives?" Tears streamed down Beatrice's face as she nodded vigorously. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, Ethan. Nothing would make me happier." Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and joy into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. Margaret and Sarah, who had been watching from the window, came rushing out to congratulate them. Richard and the boys followed, and soon everyone was celebrating. Samuel brought out a bottle of whiskey he had been saving, and they toasted the engaged couple under the stars. That night, as Beatrice lay in bed looking at the ring on her finger, she marveled at how much her life had changed in just 5 months. She had gone from being traded like property to being loved and cherished by a good man. She had found a family, a home, and a future that she had never dreamed possible. She thought about her parents and wished they could have met Ethan. She thought they would have loved him, would have approved of him. The thought made her smile even as fresh tears fell. Her parents might be gone, but their love lived on in her, guiding her, helping her recognize the good man when he walked through that door in the trading post. Beatrice and Ethan were married on a beautiful December day, just before Christmas. The ceremony took place at the small church in town, with the Hartley family and all the ranch hands in attendance. Margaret had helped Beatrice make a simple but lovely dress in white cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Sarah wove wildflowers into Beatrice's hair, and when Ethan saw her walking down the aisle, the look of awe and love on his face made Beatrice's heart overflow. They exchanged vows in front of the minister, promising to love and honor each other for all their days. When Ethan kissed her as his wife for the first time, Beatrice felt like she was the luckiest woman in the world. The Hartleys hosted a reception at the ranch, with food and dancing and celebration that lasted late into the night. Everyone wished the newlyweds well, and there was a sense of joy that permeated the entire gathering. Richard had given Ethan and Beatrice a wedding present of a small cabin on the ranch property, about a quarter-mile from the main house. It was not large, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. The Hartley family and the ranch hands had worked together to make it comfortable, adding a wood-burning stove, a comfortable bed, a table and chairs, and other necessities. When Ethan carried Beatrice over the threshold of their new home, she looked around with wonder. There were curtains on the windows, rugs on the floor, and a fire already burning in the stove to warm the space. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," Ethan said, setting her down gently. "Home," Beatrice repeated, savoring the word. "Our home." They stood together in the center of their little cabin, holding each other close. Outside, the night was cold and clear, stars blazing in the winter sky. Inside, they were warm and safe and so deeply in love it felt like a physical thing. That night, as they lay together as husband and wife for the first time, Ethan traced gentle patterns on Beatrice's skin and whispered words of love and devotion. She responded with her own declarations, her own touches, discovering this new intimacy together. "I love you," Ethan murmured against her hair. "I will spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know that." "I love you too," Beatrice whispered back. "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me." "You saved me too," Ethan said. "I was just going through the motions before you came into my life. You gave me purpose, gave me something to work toward, a future." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, content and complete. The first year of their marriage was full of joy and discovery. They settled into life as a married couple, learning each other's rhythms and habits. Beatrice continued to help Margaret with household work, and Ethan continued his duties on the ranch, but they always made time for each other. Their evenings together in their little cabin became sacred, a time to reconnect and share the events of their days. As winter gave way to spring, Beatrice began to suspect she might be pregnant. She waited to be sure before telling Ethan, and when she finally confirmed it with Margaret's help, she planned a special way to share the news. That evening, she made Ethan's favorite meal and set the table with extra care. When he came home from work, tired and dusty, he looked surprised by the effort she had put in. "What is the occasion?" he asked, washing up at the basin. "Can I not make a nice dinner for my husband without a special reason?" Beatrice teased. "Of course you can," Ethan said, coming over to kiss her. "But I know you, and you have that look that says you have something to tell me." Beatrice laughed. "You know me too well." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. You are going to be a father." Ethan's eyes went wide, and for a moment he just stared at her. Then a huge smile broke across his face, and he picked her up and spun her around carefully. "A baby! We are having a baby," he set her down gently, suddenly worried. "I should not have picked you up." "Are you all right? Do you feel well? What do you need?" Beatrice laughed at his concern. "I am fine, the baby is fine, we are both perfectly healthy." "A baby," Ethan repeated, shaking his head in wonder. He knelt down and placed his ear against her stomach, as if he might hear the tiny life growing inside. "Hello, little one. This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes at the tenderness in his voice. She ran her fingers through his hair, overcome with love for this man who was her husband, the father of her child, her everything. The news spread quickly through the ranch, and everyone was excited. Margaret was thrilled at the prospect of another baby to spoil. Sarah was going to be an aunt and could not wait. The ranch hands congratulated Ethan, teasing him about sleepless nights and dirty diapers, but their affection was clear. As Beatrice's pregnancy progressed, Ethan became even more protective and attentive. He would not let her do any heavy work, insisting she rest whenever possible. He brought her little treats from town, things he thought she might crave. He talked to the baby every night, telling stories and singing soft songs. "You are going to be such a good father," Beatrice told him one evening as they lay in bed, her rounded belly visible under her nightgown. "I hope so," Ethan said. "I want to give our children everything my parents gave me: love, security, a sense of belonging. I want them to know they are valued and cherished." "They will," Beatrice assured him. "With you as their father, they could not help but know that." In early October, almost 2 years to the day after Beatrice had first arrived at the Hartley Ranch, she went into labor. Margaret and Sarah stayed with her while Ethan paced anxiously outside the cabin, along with Richard and the ranch hands who waited to hear the news. The labor was long and difficult, but Beatrice was strong. She remembered her mother's teachings about breathing through the pain, about focusing on the reward that waited at the end. Margaret held her hand and offered encouragement, and Sarah wiped her forehead with cool cloths. Finally, as the sun began to set, the baby was born. A boy, healthy and strong, with a good set of lungs, as he announced his arrival to the world with lusty cries. "You did it," Margaret said, placing the baby in Beatrice's arms. "He is perfect." Beatrice looked down at her son, at his tiny face and his shock of dark hair, and felt a love so overwhelming it took her breath away. "He looks like Ethan," she whispered. "He does," Sarah agreed with a smile. "Should I get the proud father, please?" Beatrice said. Ethan came into the cabin looking terrified and hopeful at the same time. When he saw Beatrice holding their son, both of them safe and healthy, his face crumpled with emotion. "Come meet your son," Beatrice said softly. Ethan approached the bed carefully, as if afraid he might break something. When he looked down at the baby, tears streamed down his face. "He is so small," he whispered. "Here, hold him," Beatrice said, carefully transferring the baby to Ethan's arms. Ethan held his son with infinite gentleness, looking down at him with such love and wonder that Beatrice felt her own tears start again. "Hello, little man," Ethan said softly. "I am your papa. I am so happy to finally meet you." The baby opened his eyes and seemed to focus on Ethan's face, and they both laughed through their tears. "What should we name him?" Ethan asked, unable to take his eyes off his son. "I was thinking Matthew," Beatrice said. "Matthew James Xavier, after both our fathers." Ethan looked up at her, his expression tender. Matthew James Xavier, it is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you so much. I love you too, Beatrice replied. Margaret and Sarah left them alone to bond as a new family, and for the rest of the evening, Ethan and Beatrice marveled over their son. They examined his tiny fingers and toes, laughed at his expressions, soothed him when he cried. I never imagined I could be this happy, Beatrice said as she nursed Matthew for the first time, Ethan sitting beside her with his arm around her shoulders. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over. I was being traded like an animal with no say in my own future. And now look at us. We have a home, a family, each other. It feels like a miracle. You are the miracle, Ethan said, kissing her temple. You came into my life and transformed it completely. You gave me love and purpose and now this beautiful son. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that day I walked into the trading post and found you. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that you said I was not for sale, Beatrice replied. That you saw me as a person with value and dignity, not as property to be traded. You gave me back myself that day, Ethan. Everything good in my life now flows from that moment. They sat together in the soft lamplight of their cabin, holding their newborn son, and felt complete. The hard times they had both endured, the losses and sorrows, had led them to this moment. To each other. To this family they were building together. Life on the ranch continued, seasons turning one into another, each bringing its own rhythms and challenges. Matthew grew from an infant into a toddler, curious and energetic, following his father everywhere when Ethan was home from working the range. Beatrice and Ethan settled into parenthood, learning as they went, supporting each other through sleepless nights and childhood illnesses. 2 years after Matthew was born, Beatrice gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace Elizabeth Xavier. She had Beatrice's delicate features and Ethan's gray eyes, and she wrapped everyone around her tiny finger from the moment she arrived. Matthew was a devoted big brother, insisting on helping with everything related to his baby sister. He would bring her toys, try to feed her, and get upset when she cried. Watching their children together filled Beatrice and Ethan with joy. The Hartley family embraced Matthew and Grace as if they were their own grandchildren. Margaret spoiled them shamelessly. Sarah taught them songs and games, and Richard and his sons taught Matthew about horses and cattle as he got older. The ranch was a wonderful place for children to grow up, with wide open spaces to explore and a community that looked out for them. As the years passed, Ethan took on more responsibility at the ranch. Richard, recognizing his skill and dedication, made him foreman, overseeing the other hands and helping make decisions about ranch operations. It meant more work and more responsibility, but also more pay and security for his growing family. Beatrice continued to work alongside Margaret, but she also began teaching the ranch children to read and write. Her father's love of education had been passed down to her, and she wanted to ensure that the children growing up on the ranch had opportunities to learn. She started with just Matthew and a few of the hands' children, but word spread, and soon she had a small school going in one of the unused buildings. Margaret gave her complete support, donating books and supplies, and the parents of the children were grateful to have education available without having to send their children to the distant town. Teaching brought Beatrice great satisfaction, connecting her to her father's legacy and giving her a sense of purpose beyond her roles as wife and mother. 3 years after Grace was born, Beatrice discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she felt more confident, knowing what to expect. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and in the spring of 1885, she gave birth to twin boys, Samuel Richard and Lucas Thomas Xavier, named after Ethan's best friend and the Hartley sons who had become like brothers to him. The twins were a handful from the start, identical in appearance but different in temperament. Samuel was cautious and thoughtful, while Lucas was bold and adventurous. Matthew and Grace adored their baby brothers, and the cabin that had once seemed adequate suddenly felt very small with 4 young children. Richard, ever generous, helped Ethan build an addition onto the cabin, adding 2 more bedrooms and expanding the main living area. The other ranch hands pitched in, and what had been a small 2-room cabin became a proper family home. As their children grew, Beatrice and Ethan made sure to instill in them the values they held dear: honesty, integrity, hard work, compassion for others. They told their children the story of how they had met, how Ethan had walked into that trading post and changed the course of both their lives. "Your father saved me," Beatrice would say, "by seeing me as a person, not as property. He stood up for what was right even though it would have been easier to walk away. That is the kind of person I want you all to be." "Your mother is the bravest person I know," Ethan would add. "She had every reason to give up, to accept the fate others tried to force on her. But she stayed strong, and when I offered her a choice, she had the courage to take it. She chose to build a new life, to trust a stranger, to take a chance. That takes more strength than most people ever have to show." The children listened to this story many times over the years, and it shaped how they saw the world and their place in it. 10 years after they were married, Ethan and Beatrice stood on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Matthew was 13 now, already showing signs of the man he would become, tall and strong and thoughtful. Grace was 10, clever and kind with her mother's gentle spirit. The twins were 7, running wild and keeping everyone on their toes. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Beatrice asked, leaning against Ethan's side. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime," Ethan replied. "And sometimes it feels like just yesterday that I walked into that trading post and saw you standing there. If someone had told me that day that 10 years later I would be standing here with you, married with 4 children and a home of my own, I would have thought they were crazy," Beatrice said. "But here we are." "Here we are," Ethan agreed. He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, more beautiful now than the day I met you." "You are biased," Beatrice said, but she was smiling. "Maybe," Ethan conceded, "but I am also right. You have given me everything I ever wanted, everything I did not even know I needed. A family, a purpose, a reason to be the best man I can be. I love you more now than I did 10 years ago, and I will love you even more 10 years from now." "I love you too," Beatrice said, reaching up to cup his face. "Thank you for walking through that door. Thank you for saying I was not for sale. Thank you for giving me a chance at a real life." "Thank you for taking that chance," Ethan replied. "Thank you for trusting me, for building this life with me, for loving me despite my flaws." They kissed, a sweet, lingering kiss that still held all the passion and tenderness of their early days together. Their children, seeing them, made exaggerated gagging sounds, and they broke apart laughing. "Come here, you troublemakers," Ethan called, and the children ran up onto the porch, climbing on their parents, seeking hugs and attention. Standing there with his arms full of family, Ethan Xavier felt a profound sense of gratitude. His life had not always been easy, but it had led him exactly where he was supposed to be. To this woman, to these children, to this moment of perfect contentment. Beatrice looked at the faces of her husband and children, at the home they had built together, at the life they shared, and felt the same gratitude. She had survived tragedy and betrayal, had faced a future that seemed hopeless, and had come through it all to find something better than she had ever imagined. That night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Beatrice and Ethan sat together on their porch watching the stars. They held hands, comfortable in the silence, secure in their love. "What are you thinking about?" Beatrice asked after a while. "The future," Ethan replied. "Our children growing up, having families of their own someday. Growing old together, you and me, all the years we still have ahead of us." "It sounds wonderful," Beatrice said. "It will be," Ethan assured her. "As long as we are together, everything else will work out." The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The children grew up strong and healthy, each developing their own personalities and interests. Matthew followed in his father's footsteps, becoming a skilled ranch hand with a special talent for training horses. Grace inherited her mother's love of teaching and helped with the school, eventually taking it over completely as Beatrice focused more on her own growing children. The twins, Samuel and Lucas, were inseparable despite their different temperaments. They worked well together, their strengths balancing each other's weaknesses. They were only 15 when they helped Ethan track down a group of cattle rustlers, showing bravery and cleverness beyond their years. Richard and Margaret Hartley grew older, eventually stepping back from the daily running of the ranch and handing more responsibility to their sons James and Thomas, and to Ethan. The ranch continued to prosper under their combined leadership, expanding its operations and earning a reputation as one of the best-run operations in New Mexico. When Beatrice was 36, she gave birth to their fifth and final child, a daughter they named Hope Margaret Xavier, after the hope that had sustained them both through hard times and the woman who had welcomed Beatrice into her family when she had nowhere else to go. Hope was a surprise but a welcome one, adored by her older siblings and doted on by her parents. She grew up in a house full of love and laughter, never knowing the hardships her parents had faced, protected by the family they had built. As Beatrice and Ethan entered their 40s, they began to see their older children start families of their own. Matthew married a sweet girl from town named Emily, and they gave Beatrice and Ethan their first grandchild, a boy named Ethan James. Grace married a schoolteacher from Santa Fe, and they moved to the city, though they visited often. The twins both remained on the ranch, working alongside their father, both eventually marrying and building their own cabins on the property. The Hartley Ranch became almost a small community, with 3 generations living and working together in harmony. Through all these years, through all these changes, Beatrice and Ethan remained devoted to each other. Their love, which had begun in a moment of crisis and grown through years of partnership and shared experiences, only deepened with time. They were not just husband and wife but best friends, partners in every sense of the word. They had weathered illnesses and injuries, droughts and harsh winters, disagreements and difficult decisions, but through it all, they faced everything together. Their commitment to each other never wavered, their respect and affection never dimmed. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered to celebrate. There was a large party at the ranch, with food and music and dancing. As Beatrice and Ethan danced together under the stars, surrounded by the family they had created, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 25 years, Beatrice said, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. It went so fast. The best things always do, Ethan replied, but I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the hard times, Beatrice asked. Not even those, Ethan confirmed. The hard times taught us how strong we are, how much we can endure, how much we mean to each other. They made the good times even sweeter. You are a wise man, Ethan Xavier, Beatrice said with a smile. I am a lucky man, Ethan corrected. Lucky that I walked into that trading post at exactly the right time. Lucky that you chose to trust me to come with me. Lucky that you said yes when I asked you to marry me. My whole life, all the good in it, comes from that one moment when I decided that you were not for sale, that you deserved better than what those men were planning. And my whole life, all the good in it, comes from your courage in standing up for what was right, Beatrice replied. You could have just taken your saddle and rifle and left. No one would have blamed you. But you saw me, really saw me, and you offered me a way out. You gave me back my dignity, my freedom, my future. They danced in silence for a moment. Then Ethan said softly, I love you, Beatrice Xavier. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left. I love you too, Beatrice replied. Today, tomorrow, and always. Their children and grandchildren watched them dance, saw the love that still burned bright between them after all these years, and understood that they were witnessing something special. A love story that had begun in the worst of circumstances, and had flourished into something beautiful and enduring. As the party wound down and their children said their goodnights, Beatrice and Ethan walked slowly back to their home, hand in hand, just as they always had been. The cabin that had started so small now sprawled comfortably, filled with memories and mementos of their life together. They stood together in their bedroom, helping each other undress as they had done thousands of times before, the movements familiar and intimate. They climbed into bed and Ethan pulled Beatrice close, her back against his chest, his arm around her waist. Thank you, Ethan whispered into her hair. For what? Beatrice asked. For being you, for loving me, for building this life with me, for giving me everything I ever wanted. Thank you for the same things, Beatrice replied. Thank you for walking through that door all those years ago and changing my life forever. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, content and grateful for the life they shared. The years continued their inevitable march forward. Beatrice and Ethan grew older, their hair turning gray, their movements slowing slightly, but their love remained constant. They became the patriarch and matriarch of a large extended family, offering wisdom and guidance to their children and grandchildren. They saw their children succeed in their own endeavors, watched their grandchildren grow up, and even live to see great-grandchildren born. The Hartley Ranch, now expanded and run by the next generation, continued to thrive, a testament to the hard work and dedication of everyone who lived and worked there. On their 40th wedding anniversary, Ethan and Beatrice sat together on the porch of their home, much as they had done countless times over the years. They were in their 60s now, their bodies showing the wear of long lives spent working hard, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained strong. 40 years, Beatrice marveled. Where did the time go? Into building this, Ethan replied, gesturing broadly at the ranch, at the home they shared, at the evidence of the life they had created together. Into raising our children, loving each other, being happy. We have been happy, have we not? Beatrice asked. Incredibly happy, Ethan confirmed. I know we have had our struggles, our losses, our difficult times, but through it all we had each other. That made everything bearable, everything worthwhile. Do you ever think about that day? Beatrice asked. The day we met, all the time, Ethan admitted. I think about walking into that trading post and seeing you standing there, looking so frightened and alone. I think about the anger I felt when I realized what your uncle was trying to do. I think about the moment I decided I could not just walk away, that I had to do something. I think about it too, Beatrice said. I think about how hopeless I felt, how certain I was that my life was over, and then you walked in and everything changed. You gave me hope when I had none left. You gave me purpose, Ethan replied. I was just drifting through life, working hard but not really building toward anything. You gave me a reason to be better, to do more, to create something lasting." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the land they had worked and loved for so long. Their children and grandchildren would be arriving tomorrow for the anniversary celebration, but tonight it was just the two of them, the way it had been in the beginning. "I would do it all again," Ethan said suddenly. "Every moment, every choice, every challenge. I would do it all exactly the same because it led me to you, to this life, to this love." "So would I," Beatrice agreed. "Even the hard parts, even the painful moments, they were all part of the journey that brought us here." As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, Beatrice leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, just as she had done for 40 years. He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close, and they watched the night sky together. "I love you, Beatrice," Ethan whispered. "I love you, Ethan," Beatrice replied. And in that moment, sitting together on their porch, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a love well tended, Beatrice and Ethan Xavier were completely content. Their story, which had begun with an act of courage and compassion in a dusty trading post in 1878, had grown into something beautiful and enduring. Ethan had walked into that trading post and declared that Beatrice was not for sale. He had returned the saddle and rifle that her uncle had tried to trade her for, and in doing so, he had changed both their lives forever. That single act of standing up for what was right had blossomed into a love story that would be told to their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren for generations to come. A story about courage and compassion, about choosing love over convenience, about building something lasting from the worst of circumstances. A story about two people who found each other when they both needed it most, and who built a life together that was richer and more fulfilling than either could have imagined. As they sat together under the New Mexico stars, Beatrice and Ethan knew that whatever time they had left, they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else. Their love had weathered 40 years and would weather whatever came next, strong and true and unbreakable. And when the time finally came, years later, when they passed from this world into the next, they would leave behind a legacy of love and family, of courage and integrity. Their children and grandchildren would remember not just the story of how they met, but the life they built together, the love they shared, and the example they set. The story of a cowboy who walked into a trading post and said a woman was not for sale. The story of a woman who chose to trust a stranger and build a new life. The story of two people who found love in the most unlikely of circumstances and nurtured it into something that would last forever. It was a love story for the ages, set in the Wild West of New Mexico in 1878, and it was absolutely true in every way that mattered. Ethan Xavier and Beatrice Harper met under the worst of circumstances, fell in love under the best of circumstances, and spent the rest of their lives proving that true love, built on respect and trust and genuine affection, could overcome anything. Their story ended as all good stories should, with happiness and fulfillment, with a family gathered close and a love that never dimmed. They lived long, full lives, surrounded by people they loved and who loved them in return. They faced hardships and celebrated joys. They weathered storms and basked in sunshine. And through it all, they held fast to each other. When Ethan finally passed away at the age of 72, surrounded by his family, his last words were of his love for Beatrice. And when Beatrice followed him just 6 months later, unable to imagine life without her beloved husband, her last thoughts were of the day a cowboy had walked through a door and changed her life forever. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the Hartley Ranch, the place that had been their home for over 50 years. Their headstone bore a simple inscription: Ethan and Beatrice Xavier, beloved husband and wife, devoted parents and grandparents, together forever. And in the hearts and memories of everyone who had known them, their love story lived on, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope exists, that good people exist, that love exists, and that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say, "No, this is not right. She is not for sale." That one moment of courage had rippled outward, creating waves that touched generations. The children Ethan and Beatrice had raised went on to live lives of integrity and compassion, passing those values on to their own children. The ranch they had helped build continued to prosper, a beacon of fairness and hard work in a sometimes harsh land. And whenever their descendants faced difficult choices, whenever they struggled with what was right, they would think of Ethan walking into that trading post and taking a stand. They would think of Beatrice choosing to trust and to hope when she had every reason to despair. And they would find the strength to do the right thing, no matter the cost. That was the true legacy of Ethan and Beatrice Xavier. Not just the children they raised or the land they worked, but the example they set. The proof that love could flourish even in the harshest conditions, that dignity and respect were worth fighting for, and that every person has value that cannot be bought or sold. Their story, which began in a moment of injustice and crisis, became a testament to the best of human nature, to courage and compassion, to love and loyalty, to the power of choosing kindness when cruelty would be easier. It was a story that would be remembered and retold, a story that would inspire others to be better, to do better, to love better. And so, in the end, the cowboy who returned a saddle and a rifle and said a woman was not for sale did far more than rescue one person from a terrible fate. He started a legacy of love that would echo through the generations, proving that one act of courage can change the world, one life at a time. Beatrice and Ethan Xavier lived, loved, and died knowing that they had made a difference, that their lives had meant something, that their love had created something beautiful and lasting. And really, what more could anyone ask for? They had found each other against all odds, built a life together that was rich with meaning and joy, and left behind a family that would carry their values forward into the future. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their legacy assured. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, two souls who had been bound together by love continued on, together forever, just as they had promised all those years ago under the New Mexico stars.